I'm not pushing it at this point. The ball is in their court. They were not ready to vote.
Today on The Real Story, a very frustrated Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont, as another week has gone by without a vote at the state capitol on his treasured tolls plan. Now he plans to borrow the money to fix the state's aging roads and bridges. My first guest this morning, Republican Senator Henry Martin, ranking member of the Transportation Committee. Also today, 2 transgender student athletes fighting for the right to compete in girls' high school sports. A lawsuit seeking to keep that from happening claims the trans girls would have an unfair advantage over other girls. ACLU attorney Dan Barrett is here to talk about the issues. And I'll be talking presidential politics with Sacred Heart University Professor Gary Rose. For one thing, I want his take on the performance of former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg at the Democrat debate in Las Vegas this week. It's all today on The Real Story. Hi there, you're watching The Real Story. I'm Al Terzi. Jen Bernstein is off this week. Well, after months and months of delays, it's official. The tolls bill appears dead, at least for now. After a vote expected on Thursday was put off, Governor Lamont announced that he's going to move forward with road and bridge repairs and other transportation improvements, but he's no longer going to count on tolls to pay for them. The governor says he's now planning to use borrowing, to fund the improvements. And that's an idea Republicans were touting for a long time, and Governor Lamont opposed it. Well, one of those Republicans is here with me now, Senator Henry Martin of Bristol, ranking member of the Transportation Committee. Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so this was a big disappointment for the governor that it didn't happen. Why do you think it didn't happen? Why was there no vote?
Well,
You think they didn't have the votes, even though they said they did?
There's always that question whether or not they had the votes or not. And usually when they start putting things off, there's a lot of uncertainty within each of the caucuses, or one caucus or the other, and sometimes both. And I think this time around, I think it's probably in both, just because of the extreme amount of outcry by the citizens of Connecticut.
Yeah, he's leaving the rainy day fund alone, though. I think he's sticking with that, at least for now. We'll see where it goes, depending on how tightly it's managed. Do you expect that it'll be managed well, the progress? I mean, you're on the Transportation Committee. You have some say in that.
So, you know, that is that decision whether or not the rainy day fund will be tapped into. It's actually called the Budget Reserve Fund, and I'd like to think that the governor will start looking at the FASTER plan that the Republicans have put on the table for the last 2 or 3 months, a plan that really actually puts we don't use bonding as much as the governor does in his plan. If you start comparing the 2 plans together, governor's plan and the Republican plan, you'll see that, gee, we bond less than the governor does.
Well, so what's the status with respect to the budget right now, the remaining months of the budget year, and you've got this short session? What do you have to get done to accelerate the progress of the transportation improvements?
Well, see, that's one of the things that's the benefit of the Republican plan, is that FASTER plan puts our transportation plan immediately into work. I mean, it gets us out of the blocks immediately, compared to the governor's plan, where we would have had to wait 3 years minimum to get federal approval before we even started construction on those tolls, and then
federal approval for the federal aid to help fund this?
Yes, correct. Yeah. There was studies that needed to be done, submitted to the federal government, and then they had to review it. They had to have public hearings on the studies or on the proposals, share that information with the public, go back and make any changes, then maybe even go back to the public. But you know, they needed to see, gee, what type of effects do the tolls, wherever they may have been located, how did that affect the communities that they were located in?
The governor indicates that he's tentatively planning on borrowing $200 million a year.
Well, I think he may have said that out of frustration. I think that's, listen, if you guys, we need to get this plan, we need to get our infrastructure repaired soon. We need to get moving on.
Yesterday.
It's been
Yeah.
being discussed for years, and I think he just said, listen, you guys aren't going to vote. I need to move forward, and he was clear on that. We'd like to think that, listen, there is the plan on the table. It's been there, called the FASTER plan. If you actually look at it, and it's been vetted by the Office of Fiscal Analysis at the Capitol. They see how it works. It's also, when we first began putting that plan together, we went to the Pew Foundation, and we gave them this idea. What do you think? And we basically say, hey, listen, we want to take $1.5 billion out of the Budget Reserve Fund. And by the way, at one time, the largest amount of money we ever had in that fund was $1.2 billion. We're anticipating on having $2.7 billion. We take 1.5, and we only earn about 1%, and we take that and pay down on our unfunded liability, which is really the elephant in the room regarding our state budget.
Yeah.
And we save $300 million by doing that, and we use that to start and kick off our infrastructure repairs and renovations. We leverage that money with the federal money, which is at a 2% rate.
This gentleman, Patrick Sasser, who ran the organization No Tolls CT, apparently is a great example of how collective action works. If you get people motivated, they'll come out in droves about anything, including, as we've seen too, the issue of the religious exemption for vaccinations.
Yeah, yesterday there was a ton of people, more people than I've ever seen at the Capitol, and they testified for 22 hours at the Capitol. But when we had our transportation public hearings as well, there was a great turnout there as well. The No Tolls group organized, collected over 100,000 signatures for petitioning against. They had over 20 to 30 communities pass a resolution saying, listen, no tolls. And then they had over 2,000 people here at the Capitol. It was overwhelming. And I'd like to think that the governor will lead by saying, you know, I gave it my best try, and I think people will respect that. That, you know, he gave it his best, but the people said, listen, we don't want tolls. And I think the governor will come forward and show that, listen, I can come to the table and I can listen to your plan as well.
Your leader, Len Fasano, what is he saying about the development of this? We're not going to do tolls. We're going to. Is somebody going to come up with legislation to prevent it from ever coming up? I mean.
Well, I think, first of all, regarding the tolls, I think that outcry will continue to be there. So if it surfaces,
because a lot of people think that we should be, because all the other states are collecting money, as Governor Lamont has said, and so why shouldn't we be collecting? They're on our roads, and you know.
Al, listen, if you start comparing state by state, and you start column by column, here's Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, and start putting in all the itemized taxes that we have, such as the gasoline tax, the petroleum tax, the permitting, the licensing, and so forth, and add in tolls, and you start adding all those up column by column, you will see Connecticut at the very top with the greatest, I guess, tax impact on the citizens of the state of Connecticut. So tolls, that's why this outcry by the No Tolls group, by the state legislature, particularly the Republican caucus, that tolls cannot be the answer. People have had enough.
Just very quickly, before we move on, I want to ask you about something I just brought up a couple of minutes ago, and that was a proposal to repeal the religious exemption for vaccinations. How's that going to go, do you think, the debate on that?
I think after yesterday's public hearing, there's going to be a serious conversations and screening regarding the co-chairs of that
There's a lot of passion on this issue as well.
Absolutely. I think there's going to be some discussions and screening to do we really want to go and bring this out on the floor at this time. So.
Especially, again, with a short session and a lot to get done. Thank you, Senator Henry Martin from the Transportation Committee.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Now, still to come today here on The Real Story, the journey to the White House, a long and winding road with potholes everywhere, some natural, others dug by the candidates themselves. At the moment, which Democrat has the best chance of beating President Trump? Is it this guy? We'll get an assessment from Sacred Heart University professor Gary Rose. But next, right after a quick break, transgender athletes competing in high school sports. A lawsuit to prevent it claims trans athletes have an unfair advantage. Attorney Dan Barrett from the American Civil Liberties Union is here to talk about it in a moment.